Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Kathy Barnette Show. I am so grateful you are here. And because of you, my show is landing in the top 100 Apple Podcasts every single week almost. So thank you very much for that. I truly appreciate it. I'm so very grateful for the space and for the opportunity just to come and talk with you because, as I've said before, you are not alone. What we're experiencing right now, these are real emotions. These are real things that we're contending with. You are not crazy when you're looking at an open border and people are just flooding in and no one seems to care about it. You are not alone in your anxiety over what that means for our country and our future. So thank you so much. I'm so very grateful. And today I have, okay, you told me not to call you doctor, but I was about to, David Azerrad. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Very lovely.
Thank you so much for being here, sir. I have followed you since 2020 is when you came onto my radar. You wrote a wonderful article about, I can't remember exactly the title, but it was about conservative and whether or not it is still relevant today. And you made some very clear demarcations. I was living it, feeling it, and to hear you articulate it, it drew me to you. But let me tell others about who you are before we begin. David is an assistant professor and research fellow at Hillsdale College, Van Andel Graduate School of Government in Washington, D.C. His research and writing focuses on classical liberalism, conservative political thought, and identity politics. I mean, that's a mouthful right there. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You know, just when you first came on, I asked if you remember, if you paid attention to the U.S. Senate race here in Pennsylvania, and you said, yes, you did. And I was actually thinking, and I've thought it since, when you're running a race like that, I mean, I have blinders up, right? I'm focused on what is in front of me. You don't really see to the left or to the right until everything is over, the smoke settles, and then you begin to travel the nation and to hear so many people come up to me and say, I was watching that. I was rooting for you. It really does do a body good. It's such an encouragement. And that is one of the premises of my show is that we are not alone. We are not alone in this.
And I think it's one of the greatest sources of hope for the right that has a tendency to despair, especially the younger right. You know, the boomers tend to be more optimistic and they have nostalgia for Reagan and they think that if we elect another Reagan and cut taxes, we can save America. I find the younger right, as the kids like to say, tends to be black-pilled. They tend to despair. They look at the state of the country and they want to give up. And I think there are many grounds for serious concern about the state of what's left of our republic. But then I think there are also grounds for some cautious, moderate optimism. And one of them is the point you just made is that we're not alone. You know, Trump got 70 plus million votes after being demonized daily by the media, being called a fascist, a Nazi, having zero media endorsements. I mean, who liked him that was famous? Kanye West, and that's about it. I mean, everyone was against him. And Americans still said, I don't care. There's something about this guy that he's talking about issues that matter to me. So you can't give up when you have a base. What we need to do is find more class traders. We need more elites like Trump, like Ramaswamy, like yourself, like Tucker Carlson, like Elon Musk, who are basically comfortable in elite America, but feel a loyalty to, you know, what dismissively gets called flyover country, to the deplorables, to the Americans who, if I may quote Obama, cling to their guns and their religion. These patriotic, God-fearing, good Americans just need more people to champion their interests in DC and Manhattan and Chicago and Silicon Valley. And it's very hard. I mean, you saw it firsthand with your campaign. If you deviate from the accepted script, you get called a racist, you get called a sexist, a homophobe, you get called a fascist. And it's unpleasant. I mean, who wants to be called these things? And then it's on the internet for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. It is, it is so true. It is so true. I mean, I have a little a little pause every time I get ready to tell someone my name. Because in this world where people want to just Google everyone, I recognize the moment they Google me, what the first 2 pages of Google is going to contain. And so I often tell people, I warn them, if you're going to Google me, start with page 3. It gets better. It gets better after page 3, right? I mean, but it's very real. And it is and you're right. Unless you're suffering from some mental deficiency, you don't wake up saying, I can't wait to be rejected. I can't wait to be demonized, marginalized, dragged through the mud across the nation and lied on. You don't like it. It's not pleasant. And yet it has made me stronger in the fact that I know who I am. It's not pleasant. I don't like it. I do have a sense of lament when I think others are going to read it and think this is who I am, and the kind of psychological discomfort that will cause them. I know who I am, but I don't want, it's not something that I wake up thinking I want to impose negative energy on other people. So I do have that consideration, and it's sad, but that is the reality of the world in which we're living in, that if you're going to stand up, even if you're someone like Vivek Ramaswamy, who has been at the top of almost every single thing he has ever endeavored to do, graduating at the top of his class, Harvard and Yale, and created multiple billion-dollar companies from thin air. All of these different accolades that he has, they would love to discredit him if they could. They're just finding it difficult to.
But, that too, in a certain sense, is encouraging, because you realize that I wouldn't call it their ultimate weapon. I mean, their ultimate weapon is to unleash the FBI on you in a pre-dawn raid and kind of destroy your life. But their day-to-day most common weapon is just to call you names. And it is a choice that we still have, how to react to that. I find one complaint I have with the right, many of them just instinctively fold like a lawn chair. They're so afraid of what the New York Times thinks about them, or of what Harvard thinks about them, that they apologize. Or if they hear that Kathy Barnette was called an Islamophobe, oh, well, then I need to, avoid her. Whereas I think the right response is, what I love most about Tucker is the laugh. It's just, Ramaswamy has done it too. It's like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Racist. That's ridiculous. And you just laugh.
Stop apologizing. I tell people that all the time.
But don't get angry.
Anger
can be off-putting. I mean, it has its uses. When I moved to America from Canada, I discovered Michael Savage on AM Talk Radio, and I was kind of hypnotized by, my God, how does this guy talk? But it's off-putting to many people. I think a laugh at, like, you people are utterly ridiculous. What are you talking about? It gives you, in the eyes of the public that is watching and trying to make up its mind, the moral high ground. And that's a tool we haven't used enough.
Well, one of the things I really appreciated about you when I discovered you in 2020 is the fact that you put a big, bright, beautiful spotlight on the right? And I love that aspect of it, because I have long since believed. Now, I'm not a Democrat, of course, because I'm Black. The odds are I would have been a Democrat at some point. And I tell people I was born into the Democrat Party, just like I was born into brown skin. It is real. It's not a myth. It's like 92, 95% Black people vote for the Democrat Party. But as I often say, as you grow up, you put aside childish ways of thinking. And I was about in my junior year of college when I began to say, wait a minute, the policies are not aligning with the rhetoric right now and how they show up in real time in predominantly Black community. So that was my beginning aha moment, and it just kind of left and walked on. So I tell people, I'm not a Democrat. They suck. These ideas that are coming from them, it's just utterly ridiculous, downright evil in many regards, especially when you're talking about what they're doing to children with transgenderism and all of that. But so I don't spend a lot of time talking about the left. Instead, I want to talk about the right. And the fact that I realized very early on, especially coming out of COVID and all of that, and what we saw here in Pennsylvania, the shutting down of businesses and schools, and recognizing that very few, I can count them on one hand, the number of Republicans who were standing up and talking against what was being imposed upon the people, and how COVID started trumping the Constitution. And I began to realize something so insidious is that Democrats could not do half the stuff they're doing if Republicans weren't complicit. And over the years since 2020 to now, I recognize that these labels of Democrat, Republican, red shirt, blue shirt, black, white, gay, straight, these are all distractions. And that it's almost like a kebab of individuals. Some call it the uniparty, who are, regardless of what their motivation is, that they are operating in concert with one another against the people. And I'm going to pause and just let you take it from here. But it's what I saw when I ran for the U.S. Senate. I didn't have big name, big money. The top two people in my campaign in that race, Dr. Oz and one other, they spent $60 million in that primary. I spent $1.6 million and almost won, but it was because I spent so much time with the people. I almost went door to door across Pennsylvania. And you're right, the people are amazing in the Republican Party. It's not the people. They deserve better. They want better. They are sometimes a little easily manipulated, but they want better. They want good. They understand. They're not, bottom basement dwellers, smelling like Walmart shoppers, clinging to their Bible and their gun and just stupid. These are smart people who understand what is happening and they want better. But it is at the top, those elites within the Republican Party. They are not interested in what we, the people, even within the Republican Party, their base want. I recognize it. I see it.
The way I describe it to my students is everyone has heard the term BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. I tell them in America, we have the BIPEC, the bipartisan elite consensus, that on many issues, establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats. So don't focus on, Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC. Focus on the mainstream. They're interchangeable on foreign policy, on trade, on immigration, on their reluctance to fight the culture wars aggressively. And so, the place where you mentioned COVID, the other place where I really, really saw it was the BLM riots. Here you have violent mobs destroying American cities, causing billions of dollars worth of damage. And the country had a moment of collective psychosis. I know of two conservative organizations that absolutely refuse to bend the knee and just forcefully condemn the rioting, no ifs, and or buts. One was Hillsdale College, where I work. The president, Larry Arnn, put out a great statement. And the other is the Claremont Institute out in California. My friend Ryan Williams, who's the president of it, also put out a strong statement. And they were getting pressure from alums saying, you need to, condemn not the rioting, but systemic racism. And yes. You kind of saw in that moment, I don't want to say I want to cut them some slack, but I understand the pressures that people are under. The whole country has lost its mind. It's easy to go along, but we can't do that. And so I tell you, I agree with your approach that, look, the left is the left. You and I are not going to change the left. They don't listen to us. They don't like, oh, Kathy Barnette, what should we do on trans rights? Where we can have an influence is the right. And if I can speak a bit bluntly or flippantly, we need to uncuck the right. And it's not just the Republican Party elites, it's the conservative movement too. I've been in DC 15 years. Washington, DC sucks billions of dollars from the country of patriotic Americans telling them, we're here fighting for you. And they're not really. I mean, some are. I don't mean to dismiss everyone in the conservative movement, but, look at the reaction to Trump. Trump is not perfect. I was a bit disappointed. I supported him, but I was a bit disappointed by the first term. But it was kind of telling that the people who claim to represent patriotic America in DC almost universally opposed Trump, forcefully. The Never Trump movement came from the right, not from the left. So I entirely agree with your approach. You can't go to battle against an enemy if the generals on your side are compromised. So the priority for us has to be to sharpen the right. I would put it to you, to put to you this way, Kathy. I think we need to radicalize the right in the best sense of the term.
Yes. I agree. Vivek says that all the time, that we need a radical 1776 moment. Now, you study this at depth. I'm going to ask you another question, but let me just pause. Let me just double click on what you just said about MAGA, right? Because I saw it firsthand in my own race, is that those who I thought were MAGA, I mean, they actually came up with a new word to describe me in that race, ultra MAGA. I was the first person they used. I was the first person, New York Times and the rest of them used the word ultra MAGA on. And I remember one of them, I was just followed. I went from the media ignoring me completely in that race to now everywhere I looked, there was a gaggle of media outlets following me. And one asked, now they named me, they gave me the name ultra MAGA, but then they wanted me to define it. Like, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know, maybe ultra MAGA is gas prices at $1.82. That sounds pretty ultra MAGA to me. Maybe a secure border. That's ultra MAGA. But what I remember, that those I would have considered MAGA, right? The ones who were, encircling Trump during his administration, they were dead silent on what was happening to me. And in fact, several of them jumped on the bandwagon to condemn me and to lie on me and to commence dragging me across the nation. And then others, I was, asking if I could get on their platform, if they would interview me. You don't have to give me the questions. I wasn't asking for questions. Ask me whatever you want, but help me get in front of our people so that they know I am exactly what they've been saying they wanted. I am all about America first and these values, and they would not. They were so dead silent. And I have learned 4 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling my kids, living the best version of my life. Now I'm thrown into the midst of this, and now my eyes are beginning to open up very rapidly in real time. And I started calling them clickbait conservatives. And now when I see them and their hysteria, I agree with you that it's not just the left. It's not just the Democrat Party. It's not just what many of us would have called rhinos within the Republican Party. It is that quote unquote clickbait conservative, that they are opportunists. It's as if they think America is on the decline. So let's get what we can get before it goes under. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I saw it real time in my race. But let me go to our founding fathers a little bit, because I agree that we need this radical 1776 moment. And I have spent a lot of time reading about each of our founding fathers and on. My favorite being Alexander Hamilton. I adore him. I identify on so many levels with him. But when you read the culture and the environment that they were in, you begin to realize very quickly that this thing we call America, it was not guaranteed. There are so many opportunities for this idea of our country to just completely go off the rails. They were imperfect men. Look at, just 1787 with the U.S. Constitution. Very imperfect men. I spent a lot of time at Mount Vernon walking George Washington's property and reading books about him. And he had but one rule for everything except slavery, right? And you see this man doing so much to keep it. And yet they were great men. And I'm grateful to God for them. But what their environment seems very similar to the environment in which we're living in today. They were lying on each other, shooting reporters. It was crazy. But what was it about the character of those men that can give us some idea of what we need today, of who we need to be today, what kind of men we need to be looking for today?
That's a good question, to which I've given some thought. Let me share with you my favorite line in the Declaration of Independence. It's not in the second paragraph. It's not in the last paragraph. It's the fifth grievance leveled against the King of England. And the signers of the Declaration say, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. So look, declaring rights is easy. Read the Syrian constitution or the Soviet constitution. Rights will be encroached. Governments will violate them. Mobs will misbehave. The question is, what do you do? You know, the founders declared war on the most powerful country in the world over a tax dispute. Compare that with what we put up with, in a certain sense, in a docile way. You know, the thought that worries me the most is that they basically steal the 2024 election, i.e., cheat, do legal shenanigans, I don't know what, in a way that is quite bold. And what crushes my heart is to think, and we do nothing about it. We complain. We write, you know, the Wall Street Journal will say this is not okay, but everyone goes back to living their lives. And I'm not suggesting taking up arms should be a lighthearted thing to do, but you got to ask yourself, like, what's the breaking point? Like, at what point do we say enough? So I don't have a clear counsel on what to do right now because it's too complicated and I don't have certainty. But I can tell you that what I see in the founding generation is a much greater love of liberty than we have. I think we're more attached to comfort than we are to liberty. Because at the end of the day, we read about all the horrors in America and the mobs and the corruption of the criminal justice system and the pre-dawn raids and the DOJ. But then, you know, we lead pretty comfortable lives. We have 2 cars, things kind of work. And at the end of the day, we're like, well, this is really bad, but I like my life. And look, I'm guilty of that. Everyone does that. We live in the suburbs. It's kind of okay. But you got to ask yourself, at what point do we say enough?
Do you think there's some intentionality among those who are driving these radical left-wing changes in hopes that people will get radical, not in thought and posture of standing up against boldly the left plans, but that we will take up arms? Do you think there is sometimes I feel like I know this is very intentional where we find ourselves. And sometimes I believe that, or sometimes I think that maybe they want people to do another January 6th, but this time with real violence, so that they can really come down hard on people.
Yeah, I don't think it's the primary motivation, but it's definitely a benefit to them because the fundamental problem that the left has is that the supply of fascists in America doesn't meet the demand that the left has. I mean, they want a country that is filled with radical white supremacist, revolutionary neo-Nazi groups, and you just don't find that many. I mean, you find patriotic citizens who, caused a 4-hour disturbance on January 6th, none of whom were armed. I mean, some of them misbehaved more than others, but many didn't, and were kind of invited in by the Capitol Hill police. And so it would definitely help them. But I want to make clear, look, Kathy, it's such a momentous question. I don't know what to do. I'm pretty sure that if they cheat brazenly in 2024, it pains me to say this, I don't think we're going to do anything about it. And then you got to ask yourself, well, what does this mean for us? I mean, we'll complain about it. And am I saying we should take up arms against the US government just like that on a whim? No, that sounds imprudent. But on the other hand, what's our limit? I mean, at what point do we just say, well, we're no longer a republic? I mean, yeah, the Constitution is there on paper, but let's be honest. No plausible reading of the Constitution could legitimize the US government as it exists today. You think the founding fathers, if we gave them the Constitution with all 27 amendments, and then gave them a tour of Washington, D.C. and the agencies and explained to them how everything operates, they would say, well, clearly this is not the government that is governing this is not the document that governs this government. you must have another constitution you didn't show me. And he would say, no, actually, this is it. It's just the judges, the bureaucracy, kind of make it up as they go along. So short of revolution, I think one thing we need to do is just to foster in the people more of that. To quote my favorite, I quoted my favorite line from the Declaration. I'll quote you my favorite line from the Federalist Papers. It's Madison in Federalist 57. He speaks of the vigilant and manly spirit which actuates the people of America, a spirit which loves liberty and in return is nourished by it. So I am very much in favor of anything that revives and strengthens manliness and spiritedness in the American people.
And are you saying manly, like as in a man versus a
Yes.
woman, manly? Now, and that just rings to my ear because we're living in a culture where it's anything but manliness. What do they mean by that?
Well, so I think they meant a couple of things. One is, we always need to add the disclaimers because we live in such a feminized age. Obviously, some men are unmanly, and obviously some women can be manly. Look at Margaret Thatcher, okay? That being said, on the whole, manliness is a characteristic you'd expect more from men than you would from women. And it manifests itself as, I think, a love of liberty above comfort, a willingness to take certain risks, a willingness to incur disfavor with public opinion. And look, the ultimate manifestation of it is courage on the battlefield, is the willingness to risk, and in certain cases, to give up your life in defense of your homeland, your family, or a noble cause. But it doesn't have to get to that. I mean, there are peaceful manifestations of manliness. But and some of them I think are more accessible to women. I mean, the one I encourage all Americans to do is just to quote Solzhenitsyn, live not by lies. Refuse to affirm the lies of the regime.
Absolutely.
Laugh about them, snicker, surround yourself with sane people. And when they try to show you a person with a penis and tell you this is a woman,
yes.
You laugh.
No,
Well,
exactly.
maybe,
I just refuse it.
Maybe you don't laugh at work because HR is going to fire you. And, you got to have sympathy for people. Like they got to provide for their families and they're at the mercy of these, Talibans in the HR department. Okay, so maybe at work you keep quiet, but at church with your friends, in your civic associations, do not affirm their lies. Have the courage to say, I will not allow their lies to bury themselves in my mind.
Hey, everyone. Just want to interrupt the podcast for a moment to tell you about a special offer. Mike Lindell has done it again. As usual, he's out there in the world finding solutions to problems we all have. My towels solved a problem that we all had with towels. You go into the store, they look so pretty, they look so soft, they feel soft, they look lotiony, and then you get them home and they don't actually dry your body. Well, that's why Mike Lindell made my towels. They actually work. They're soft and they absorb. And now My Pillow is excited to announce 2 brand new lines of my towels. Now, what makes them the best towels ever is that they're now made with a 100% long staple Sherpa cotton. This is a comb ring spun cotton that makes my towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory price of $29.98. Now, that's not happening. I'm sure you're out there trying to purchase new towels now. You have friends and family coming over for the holidays, and you know that you're not going to get a 6-piece towel set of this quality for $29.98, but you can go to mypillow.com, use promo code Kathy with a K, or call 800-988-3934. That's 800-988-3934 and get your 6-piece introductory set for $29.98. You can get a designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save $50. Everyone actually gets dried off and you look like a champ. So they actually work. Just go to mypillow.com and use promo code Kathy with a K. this offer won't last long. So please go order now.
I mean, that is kind of the baseline. But, to go back to your question about manliness, I mean, part of it, I think, is tied to physical strength. I mean, one thing that causes me concern about the state of our country is we are the fattest developed nation in the world. You can find a few islands in the Pacific like Nauru and, Micronesia that are more obese. That's not a sign of civic health. That's a sign that we have lost control over the appetites. And that's a problem. We are also the largest producers and consumers of pornography in the world. That's another sign that we've lost control over the sexual appetites. So the point is not to become puritanical and humorless and starve ourselves to death and view all sex as sin. But I think on the right, we need to recognize that this is an issue that shouldn't just belong to the Christian right or to moralists like Michelle Obama telling us to get fit. I think it should be a right-wing issue to emphasize health and physical strength, not at the expense of everything else. One problem I have with the right-wing bodybuilder movement is that they make lifting weights the pinnacle of human existence, and it isn't. There are higher things in life like family, God, and country than lifting weights, but I think that's something that could be promoted, and it would have spillover effects. I've just seen it in my students. Something starts to happen to the boys when they get a bit stronger, when they're in competitive sports, that affects the way they think. And that's one issue that we could promote more aggressively, and I think it would have spillover effects in our politics. That's why, by the way, the left freaks out about this. And they say that if you start going to the gym, you're a proto-fascist.
Or fat shaming, like don't fat shame. Fat is beautiful. No, fat is not. Fat messes up with your joints. It's hard to walk. Your back hurt. You have headaches, high blood pressure. Your telomeres are shortened. Lifespan is shortened. And yet there's a movement in our culture that, fat is beautiful. Don't fat shame people. That, some of these really obese. I mean, even when I've seen some of these obese, quote unquote elites try to lose weight, they start fat shaming them and tell them, no, don't lose weight. When we all know that increased weight, obesity is harmful to not just your life expectancy, but your quality of life.
And also, Kathy, it pacifies you. I don't know if you've read Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, the novel he published in 1932. Which is so prescient in many ways because he warned of a tyranny through pleasure. So Orwell in 1948 got all of the attention with the tyranny through fear. But Huxley saw perhaps an even more dangerous future is pacify the population with sex, drugs, and entertainment. That way they come to love their servitude. So encourage them. Why is the regime waging a war on cigarettes but encouraging marijuana and weed? Isn't that interesting? Because weed makes you numb. You kind of veg out in your parents' basement, and then you get the munchies and you get fat. Cigarettes sharpen the mind. They're a social vice. You talk to people. You meet women. They don't like that. They want you with the video games, the porn, the junk food, glued to your screen because it pacifies you. I don't think this is a conspiracy. I just think they want to root out from the souls of the American people this vigilant and manly spirit in order to make them more pliant and servile.
And so maybe that is the one of many sharp distinctions when you look at the founding generation and who were these men to risk life and wealth and all to forge this thing called America that wasn't reflected in the world around them. And yet they did it and persevered. And here we are almost 300 years later, still enjoying the benefits of that. And maybe that's what we should be looking for, like that kind of leadership, manly leadership, and not manly in the sense of man versus women, but primarily, that's where we would see it. But that kind of strength and perseverance and determination and vigilance to fight for those things that we know to be true. Like when, Bruce Jenner came out and he's supposed to be someone else. I refuse to play that game. I am not going to intentionally do contortionist tricks on my own mind because not only am I deluding myself, and I believe that those delusions can become very real to people, but I'm teaching my children as well who are watching me. Like, I know that this is not a woman, but what about the next generation that we're teaching them they cannot believe their eyes, that they can't trust their eyes, that they have to wait for someone else to tell them what is true, what is not true? What is that going to produce as these little people grow up to be big people? And now they are our accountants, that they are our legislators. Now they can't trust themselves. They have to wait to be told what is real, what is not. So those are just natural. And I'm not trained from from an education perspective on philosophy and things like that. But I read, and I remember reading our founding father, John Adam, wrote a letter to his wife, Abigail. And and people quote this often, but it meant something to me when he said, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for any other kind. And the word moral there simply means people who know the difference between right and wrong, people who know the difference between up and down, left and right, black, white, boy, girl, just knowing simple differences and then putting a stake in the ground. And I can't remember exactly how he said it. You probably remember it exactly, but he goes on to say, when we become a nation, avarice, he used that word, who display unwarranted chivalry. It's unwarranted to be so chivalrous. He said, we will begin to move through the Constitution like a whale moves through a net. And I can just look at the first 5 rights of the First Amendment. And I ask people, name the first 5 rights in the First Amendment. And then I begin to give examples how we've moved through each of them like a whale moves through a net. It is just word. It has no meaning any longer in the world in which we live in.
You know, as a foreigner, I'm from Canada, which,
yeah,
in many regards is like America. Like if you came from Kenya and spent a week in America and a week in Canada, you think, wow, like what these very developed, wealthy Western nations. 2 big differences are free speech, the First and Second Amendment. Canada has criminalized so-called hate speech. I say so-called hate speech because you know exactly who they go after.
Yeah, it's very subjective.
Very subjective. And it's a way to basically silence political dissent. In America, you get called a bad name on the internet, but thankfully for the time being, the government doesn't prosecute you if you speak in a politically incorrect way. And then the other big difference is we still have a Second Amendment. And I got to tell you, that is huge. And as an immigrant to this country, it took me a long time to understand that one. You know, I thought like I remember listening to Ben Shapiro when I moved to the US, and he would talk about the importance of the Second Amendment for resisting tyranny. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. The government has F-16s and you've got your little Glock and you think you're going to resist to it. But then I spoke to a friend of mine who did 3 tours in Iraq, and he told me we got bogged down with small arms in the big Iraqi cities. And so one is small weapons in an urban context are actually capable of standing up to a big army. But the second deeper reflection is it's not about going head to head with the Marines. It's about the psychology of the citizens. What does it do to a citizen to think the primary responsibility to protect my family lies with me? Obviously, it's supplemented by the police, but I should know how to use a firearm responsibly. It just changes the way you think about things. And America, thankfully, still has strong Second Amendment protections. In Canada, it's practically impossible to own a firearm. And again, this contributes to the feminization of the population, to making them more docile, having less of that vigilant, independent spirit that is befitting citizens of a republic. So you're right that we've lost many rights, but it is encouraging that, look, you and I can have this conversation and it's going to be posted on the Apple Store. And then, you can buy a firearm in America pretty easily. So that gives me some hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is reason to hope. One, I'm a Christian. My hope is in Christ. My hope is not in the circumstances around me. And yet I am a citizen. I'm a human being in a physical space and time. And I am watching the things that are happening. And it does induce anxiety if you and it can lead to hopelessness, which I think is another issue in our country. You have to be very intentional about managing your mind. So let me just put that out there, because you can become very overwhelmed. And I see the pressures. I can't help but to stand where I am and begin to project outwards and say to myself, if we continue on this path, where would we be? We saw during COVID, these people want to shut down. I mean, they would take away your livelihood. They will destroy your name, destroy your family. They will come and raid you and put you in prison. We see that, on if you're right now, we have freedom of speech, but we saw during COVID, they were shutting it down on social media. They were shutting down the right to, so freedom of speech, one of the five first rights, freedom of religion. Here in Pennsylvania, if you wanted to go to church during COVID, they said, no, you can't. We're shutting it down. And if you decide to do it, we will send the health department and they will write down the license plates and we will come to your home, right? That really happened here. So that's freedom of religion. So we see the threat on that. Freedom to assemble, freedom to speak your grievances to your government. Do we need to go? Do we need to talk about January 6th and what has happened to these people? And so you see that, yes, these things are still on paper. And yes, we still get to enjoy the benefits. But the threats are very real. The threats are there. These people are very determined. They have removed their masks. They are not pretending any longer. They're telling us exactly who they are and what they would do. And yet, to your previous point, as I'm walking across the nation with Vivek and we're getting ready to have the Iowa caucus is about to happen in less than 2 weeks. The reality is that there is a tremendous amount of apathy and it is real. And at a time when people should be waking up and engaged, especially when you have someone like Vivek who is speaking what the overwhelming majority of us are thinking, apathy is real. People have checked out. And I'm thinking to myself, something you said earlier, I cringe at the thought, what more needs to happen to us before we wake up?
Part of the apathy, I think, comes from a sense of there's nothing to be done. It's all over. There's a French quote I love from a French author. He says, l'espoir, c'est le désespoir surmonté. Hope is despair overcome.
Wait, say that again. Hope is despair
overcome. Meaning real hope is not mindless affirmation. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay.
Sounds like MAGA.
Real hope is staring at the face of despair, saying, you know what? I see as well as you do everything that's wrong with the country. And yet I'm going to kind of pierce through it and not give up because there are other reasons to be cautiously optimistic. And to go back to the point about manliness, it's not just an intellectual calculation. At the end of the day, what I tell audiences when I speak is it would be the most un-American thing in the world to give up on America. Like if you want to give up on Belgium and as a Belgian, I don't care. Like Belgium doesn't, has not inspired millions of people across the world with an image of what it means to be free men and women. You don't give up on America, but we really need to take stock of where we are and stop deluding ourselves. Meaning recognize that there's a case to be made for despair, but then kind of smash through it if you want. See it through, overcome it. I think that's the best kind of hope because it's sober and rational rather than just motivated by simple-minded enthusiasm.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I have so many questions. I wanted to talk to you about Claudine Gay, DEI, all this other stuff, but I love what you just said. I want to leave on that note because I think, hope is sparse out here in the culture. I think thoughts are real. They occupy real space and territory in our minds, and we need to hear something to anchor onto. I agree with you. I grew up on a pig farm in Southern Alabama. I grew up very impoverished. I tell my story all the time with the hope of encouraging people of how amazing this country is. And so many people who have come here because of that bright light on a hill. And I believe this is the greatest country that has ever existed. I am so very grateful. I love Israel, but I believe America is one of the greatest countries that have ever existed. I believe God has blessed this country with so much. And you're right. Regardless of what is happening, I am committed, my family and I, to fight for this country. That's the reason why they can drag me. You got to go to the third page of Google to read anything positive about me. I will not give up because I too believe this country is worth fighting for. And I don't have a plan B. And that is some trepidation there as well. But this is it for us. And so we have to fight. There's a lot of reasons to be hopeful.
Amen. Thank you for what you do, and keep your chin up. Remember that I'll leave you with my favorite quote from a contemporary thinker. Pat Buchanan says in his memoirs that courage is contagious.
Courage is contagious.
So you keep on being courageous, and you speak out loud, and 10 other people who were hesitant to speak out loud will be inspired by what you say and say, you know what, she said it, I'm going to say it too.
I have seen it. I saw it in my own race. I see it with Vivek. Fear is contagious. That is true, but courage is contagious too. And so I'm about to call you doctor again, but David Azerrad, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing, training those young minds.
Thank you, Kathy. It was such a pleasure.
Yes, blessings. And guys, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. Continue, be hopeful. And it's not false hope. It's not doing gotcha memes on Twitter and epic takedown videos. No, that's not real hope. There's a lot of clickbait conservatives out there. That's not it. Chanting. No, there are real reasons to be hopeful. I am seeing so many amazing people, Americans, begin to find a way to stand and to be counted. So be hopeful. God bless you, you and your family, and see you next time.